Thank you very much. In some of the questions that have reached us in the meantime, I would suggest, since they come largely, I guess, from Germany and at least the German-speaking region here in Europe, that we reserve these maybe for the weekly audio podcast. But there's one question that I've kind of saved for the end because, in a way, even though it seems a very simple question, but I have a gut feeling that it really addresses a very fundamental question of personal identity. This is a supporter who says that he or she is very concerned about the developments in this world right now, and this is probably the case with many people, and asks also talks about that addressing these kinds of issues with family or friends is something that I have tried, but my experience is that people don't want to know about these things, they don't want to talk about it. And he says, I would support everything that I think would have some kind of a reasonable hope for success. I would be for doing whatever it takes. And so the concrete question is, for someone like me, who has very limited means at my disposal, what is necessary for me? What can I do personally to actually cause the necessary change? And we would just take this, I think, as the last question for tonight.
Well, I think the role of the individual in history is a very important question, because it has been emphasized by my husband many times, and everybody who has ever engaged in any kind of creative activity knows that creative mentation, creative activity is the role of one person. A poem is never being written by two people, simply because if you have a poetical idea or a musical idea, it is something which forms uniquely in your mind, solving, the idea of going to the next higher level, which is not in the prose. You have to form a gestalt which addresses this higher faculty, which, is what is new. Any progress is occurring in this way. And, that is something open to anybody. Just think about how many discoveries were made by such individuals, often being, in a social context, but sometimes also not, or being against the mainstream. So the individual creative development is something which is absolutely unique. However, you don't have to start from zero, because right now, I think the existence of our movement in the world, which started, well, it's hard to say, maybe it started in the beginning of the 50s, when Mr. LaRouche discovered why the prevailing economic theories of von Wiener and Neumann, the statistical thinking, the whole information theory, why they were inherently incapable of addressing the nonlinear developments in the economy, probably was the beginning of this organization. And in the 50, 60 years since, we have become, I would say, a quite respected, recognized alternative to the present system of globalization. When you meet us for the first time, obviously you cannot know that, but we have proven many times that the power of ideas can change history. The most noteworthy examples was our collaboration with López Portillo, the president of Mexico, in defining Operation Juarez, which had Wall Street tremble for half an hour, fearing that a debtors cartel would form and it would be the end of Wall Street. Another extremely important example was the authorship of Mr. LaRouche concerning the SDI, which after all was becoming official American policy pronounced by Ronald Reagan on the 23rd of March in 1983, which led, among other things, to the collapse of the Soviet Union, not because it was intended in such a way, but because it was rejected by the Andropov government at that time, and Mr. LaRouche in '84 predicted that if the Soviet policy would remain on that level, the Soviet Union would collapse in 5 years. Now, it did, and I can assure you, nobody at that point believed that to be true. But then it did happen, and that has led to a absolutely intense studying of the ideas of Mr. LaRouche, especially in Russia, because a lot of scientists, a lot of academicians, a lot of people said, how could Mr. LaRouche predict the collapse of the Soviet Union when everybody else was not able to do so? And Mr. LaRouche has a unique record of predicting economic crisis spots where all his so-called economist opponents utterly failed, and the whole science of economists has failed, and they should pack in and either study physical economy or learn to become a baker or some other useful profession, and not put out their stupid predictions any longer. Now, so this has grown. We have worked with Indira Gandhi. We have worked with the Chinese government on the Eurasian land bridge. We have many friends in Africa who know that our policy is the only hope for this continent. So the way to look at us as an organization is not just a group of a few people in one country, like the BÜSO, but we have for the last 40 or 50 years established ourselves as the alternative to the present oligarchical system by having proposed development perspectives for Africa, for the Oasis Plan for the Middle East, for the development of Latin America, Operation Juarez, the Eurasian land bridge, which later became the World Land Bridge. And many people who believe that that is the better way to go, really know that we are representing a complete set of different principles than the present powers to be. And even more important, if you look at the popular cultural matrix which exists today in culture, in the youth culture, in other popular entertainment, in the almost loss of principles of classical composition in great classical music, in great classical poetry, well, then you can say that the work which was initiated by my husband, Lyndon LaRouche, and which has been contributed by many members of this organization since, well, we have revived, at a point where civilization almost was in a dark age, losing all of these precious treasuries from previous high points of civilization, and we have revived it. So that now people are studying Dante, Petrarca, Jeanne d'Arc, all kinds of beautiful poets and composers, and that would have been lost. And if you want to come to a Renaissance, you have to actualize the high points of previous periods in order as a jumping board for the next level of cultural Renaissance. So in a certain sense, even if we may be physically a relatively small force, I think the power of ideas, which we have demonstrated again and again in history, is something where if you join us as a movement, you are immediately a part of, and you participate and partake in that powerful force which we represent as an international movement. So, the question of what can you do as an individual, well, keep pestering your relatives, because, in each case, we had a similar experience. In the beginning, they say, oh, you are completely far off. And now many people say, oh, you were right. And, so don't be intimidated by, public opinion and vox populi, because most people have been brainwashed by the mass media. But we are now in such a tumultuous and absolutely dramatic period where this can change absolutely dramatically. Work on your own intellectual development, your own classical development, your own aesthetical education. Become a better human being for being able to contribute better to the development of the humankind at this grave moment of danger. And join the organization, because together you can do a lot. And we have proven again and again that we shape the debate. We have shaped the debate about galactic weather. We have shaped the debate about Glass-Steagall in Europe. A year ago, nobody knew what Glass-Steagall was. Trennbankensystem was almost unknown to anybody. Now everybody and his uncle is talking about it. So be confident that once you decide to do what is necessary, to do what Friedrich Schiller said, find your freedom in necessity, and then you are truly free. And that's the best chance you have to, make your life something extremely important for the outcome of this historical moment.